Good evening, everyone. Please direct your attention to the screen.
We'll never own up to our past.
We'll never build sustainable cities.
We'll never set foot on another planet.
We'll never stop the overdose crisis.
We'll never find a cure for Alzheimer's.
We'll never treat each other as equals.
We'll never clean up our oceans.
But together,
we have the potential.
We have the potential to shape a different future.
Different future.
a different future.
Welcome to UBC Connects. For today's event, we'll be using a web-based platform called Slido. It lets you ask questions in real time. It works on any mobile device, so take out yours and follow along. We'll show you how to get started. Although we do want you to use your device, please make sure it's on silent, as we don't want to interrupt the program. Now, once you've confirmed that your device is on silent, pull up your browser and go to slido.com. Now enter the event code UBC Connects. You'll see the hashtag symbol is already populated. All you need to do is enter UBC Connects, all one word. Now you're all set to submit your questions by clicking on the Ask button. Other people can like your question by giving it a thumbs up. When we get to the question and answer part of the program, our moderator will ask the top-rated questions first. You can start submitting questions, but they won't be visible until the moderator appears. At that point, you can start voting. Before you go, we have one more thing to ask. We'd like you to take out that mobile device one last time and go to the polling tab. That's where you'll see a few questions about your event experience. Please do take a moment. Your feedback matters to us. Enjoy the program.
Please welcome to the stage instructor at the Vancouver School of Economics, Dr. Marina Adshade.
Good evening. My name is Marina Adshade. I'm an instructor at the Vancouver School of Economics here at UBC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We're thrilled to have you join us tonight in the room as well as online for this event. In a few moments, Sandra J. Ono, President and Vice Chancellor of the University of British Columbia, will tell you more about the Connect series. But first and foremost, and importantly, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Tonight we will hear a presentation from Dr. Helen Fisher, and I, for one, am thrilled. 10 years ago, when I started my own research career in love, I do the economics of sex and love, I was inspired by Helen Fisher's work, and I decided to reach out to her and ask her for some guidance. And to my absolute amazement, she responded. I got to see that generosity again this morning. She came to my class. I teach women in the economy at UBC. And I can tell you that my students had the best second class of the term for any class in the university. Okay, so following Dr. Fisher's presentation, Catherine Gretzinger, Senior Instructor at the UBC Graduate School of Journalism and longtime journalist and public broadcaster at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, will join Dr. Fisher on the stage and will moderate an in-conversation with our distinguished speaker, and then open up to a short Q&A with the audience. Tonight's program is being live streamed for those who could not be with us this evening. An audio podcast, as well as a selection of video clips, will be posted on the website www.ubc.ca/UBC Connects following the event, so you can share it with your families and friends. I know that I'll be doing that. As you just saw, for the Q&A, we'll be using an online audience engagement platform called Slido to include everyone in the conversation. I actually assured Dr. Fisher that here in Vancouver, we love to ask questions after presentations, and I'm sure that you're going to have a lot to ask her. As a reminder, you can submit your questions now, and throughout Dr. Fisher's presentation, but we're going to hold off posting the questions you submit us until our moderator takes the stage. At this time, you'll be able to vote on all of the submitted questions. If you'd like to tweet during the program, could you please use @UBC and hashtag UBC Connects. Let's get started. It's my pleasure to tell you a little bit about Professor Ono before I invite him onto the stage and say a few words and introduce our honored guest. Professor Ono earned his BA in Biological Sciences at the University of Chicago and his PhD in Experimental Medicine at McGill University. His principal research interests focus on the immune system and eye disease. Early in his career, he held a variety of teaching, research, and administrative positions at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, Harvard Medical School, University College London, Emory University, and finally at the University of Cincinnati, where he served as president starting in 2012. In 2015, Insider Higher Education named Professor Ono America's most notable university president. He is now the 15th president and vice chancellor of the University of British Columbia and the host of this public lecture series. Please join me in welcoming Santa J. Ono to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. I hope that you're getting ready for a treat. Thank you, Marina. I'm excited to be here with you today for the very first UBC Connects lecture of this fall, and I'd like to welcome all of you that are actually joining us via live stream. As some of you may know, if you've been to this series before, UBC Connects is a public lecture series. UBC brings it to the public and shares speakers with the general public. It's an initiative to feature esteemed thought leaders and focuses on pressing global issues and topics of just general interest. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize and thank the R&J Stern Family Foundation for their generous support of this series, our colleagues at Alumni UBC for their support, and the Georgia Strait, our media partner, for supporting this event. Tickets for our next speaker, journalist, author, and UBC alumna, Zia Tong, will be on sale tomorrow, September 11th at noon. And if you're interested, I encourage you to be on that website soon because these tickets sell out very quickly. You can visit ubc.ca/UBC Connects for more information about that lecture as well as other upcoming lectures. Now, without any further ado, I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Helen Fisher. She is the most referenced scholar in the field of love and relationships in the world today. She is a senior research fellow at the Kinsey Institute and an anthropologist at Rutgers University. She is a pioneer in the biology of human personality and the neurochemistry of love and leadership. And she has a personal interest in this, being an identical twin. And she thought about the differences and similarities between herself and her identical twin. Named a TED All-Star and one of the 15 most amazing women in science today by Business Insider, Dr. Fisher has given the world a new way to look at relationships, both personal and professional. She's a hardcore scientist. As chief scientific advisor for Match.com, Dr. Fisher developed the Fisher Temperament Inventory, the first and only personality questionnaire built from and validated by neuroscience, which has been taken by more than 14 million people in 40 countries. Her discovery of the 4 basic biological styles of thinking and behaving, explorer, builder, director, and negotiator, represents the biggest leap in personality tools in the last century. Dr. Fisher has written 5 best-selling books on the neuroscience behind human social behavior, including the 1994 classic Anatomy of Love, reissued in 2016. She has addressed audiences at Fortune, the Cannes Lion International Festival of Creativity, the World Economic Forum, The Economist's Ideas Economy, and G20. Her 3 TED Talks have been viewed by more than 12 million people worldwide. It is our absolute pleasure to introduce Helen Fisher to this evening's audience. Welcome her, please.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted that you are here. I just want to start with the ending, which is I think that we are actually at a time in human evolution which is one of the most fascinating. We're in the middle of a marriage revolution that some demographers believe is as powerful as the Industrial Revolution. Enormous changes. And what I hope I'm going to be able to convince you of is that I'm extremely optimistic about the future. For very good Darwinian, evolutionary, statistical, and academic reasons, and that millennials are leading the way. I am really proud of millennials. If you're a millennial in this room, you are our future, and you got us a good one, too. So, and I'm going to show you why. But anyway, so is technology killing love? That's what people are always asking, and in fact, the answer is no. You cannot kill love. It's a brain system. It evolved over 4 million years ago, and it's going to be with us 4 million years from now. It's a brain system like the fear system, or the anger system, or the joy systems, or the anxiety systems. You can't kill this. If you're swiping left or right on Tinder, it's going to remain with us as long as we survive as a species. So anyway, I study the brain. I and my colleagues have put over 100 people into a brain scanner who were madly in love. The first group were 15 people who had just fallen happily in love. The next group were 17 people who had just been rejected in love. Nobody gets out of love alive. We all have our problems. And the last, another group was a group of people who were in love long term. You can remain in love long term. You've got to pick the right person, and I want to talk about that tonight, too. So bottom line is this brain system evolved over 4 million years ago, as I've mentioned, and it's going to be with us forever. Around the world, people love. They pine for love, they live for love, they kill for love, and they die for love. It's one of the most powerful brain systems the human animal has ever evolved. And everywhere we celebrate it. In hunting and gathering societies, they have myths and legends. They have songs and poems and dances. In industrial, sophisticated societies, we have operas, plays, stories, songs, ballets. We're saturated. We are saturated. We got cards, we got letters, we got emails, we got emojis, we got holidays. We are saturated in this huge celebration and angst, really, about love. It can occur, anthropologists have now looked at it. We find it in every culture on Earth, everywhere they've looked. The youngest person that I ever knew who was madly in love, in fact, I was giving a speech to a group of mothers in New York. It was a couple of years ago. And I said, does anybody have a child who's in love? And one woman said, oh yeah, my child's in love. Every single time a particular little girl comes over to our house, he just sits next to her and just strokes her hair. And I said, how old is your child? And she said, 2.5. So we're not talking about the sex system. We're talking about feelings of intense romantic love. There's no gender difference in it. Heterosexuals and homosexuals. I'm not talking now about who you love, but how you feel when you love. And indeed, gays are exactly like straights. It's just a basic brain system. And so I began to think that this was a universal experience. They could have evolved a long time ago to start the mating process. So I'm going to go first through some of the traits of it so that you know what we're doing. First thing that happens when you fall in love is a person takes on what I call special meaning. Everything about them is special. The car they drive is different from every car in the parking lot. The house they live in, the book bag that they got, everything about them is special. Then you focus on them. You just remember every single thing they said and did. Euphoria and energy when you're, walk all night and talk till dawn. Euphoria when things are going well. Horrible despair when things are going poorly. Real bodily reactions, butterflies in the stomach, dry mouth, wobbly knees when you're near them. Real emotional and physical dependence. You're constantly checking your texts, you're constantly checking your emails, you're wondering where they are, etc. I've got a pretty new boyfriend, and I have to say I checked myself today a lot of times to see if he had written. He did. Separation anxiety, you don't like to be apart. Frustration attraction, I made that term up. But I know the biology of it. When you can't get what you want, you just try harder. So they dump on you, they say the wrong thing, you don't think you're loved, and you just want them more. What a disaster. Real sex drive, you want to have sex with them. Mate guarding is an academic term for the jealousy and possessiveness that one feels when they're madly in love. But even though the sex drive is quite high, I'll explain some of the genetics of that, but what you really want them to do is create emotional union. You want them to call, to write, to invite you out, to tell you that they love you. It's a real craving. And probably the biggest and most important indication of it is what we call intrusive thinking. Somebody is camping in your head. You can't get them out. You wake up thinking about them, you go to bed thinking about them, you're constantly thinking about this person. And you're highly motivated to win them. Boy, what people do in order to win a sweetheart is just amazing. And last but not least, it's quite involuntary. Stendhal, the French writer, once said, "Love is like a fever. It comes and goes quite independently of the will." And indeed, it does. It's very difficult to control. And in fact, I began to think to myself, well, it could be one of 3 different brain systems that evolved together to orchestrate our mating process. Sex drive, linked with testosterone in both men and women. Romantic love or attraction, I'm going to try to prove to you that it's linked with the dopamine system largely, and others as well. And the attachment system linked, I don't do the work on attachment, but other scientists have shown that it's linked with a different set of neurochemicals, oxytocin and vasopressin. So I think that the sex drive gets you out there looking for for a whole range of partners. You don't have to be in love with somebody to have sex with them. I think romantic love enables you to focus your mating energy on a particular individual. And I think that 3rd brain system evolved to enable you to tolerate this person really long enough to have at least one child together as a team. So they generally interact in all kinds of ways. Often the sex drive, when you have sex with somebody, actually there's no such thing of casual sex. Unless you're so drunk you can't remember it, casual sex, things happen in the brain. Any stimulation of the genitals drives up the dopamine system and push you over the threshold into being in love. And with orgasm, there's a real flood of oxytocin and vasopressin linked with feelings of attachment, and you can begin to feel deeply attached to somebody. So, as I said, casual sex is really not casual unless you're spaced out somehow. The problem is these brain systems are not always connected. You can even lie in bed at night and feel deep attachment to one person and then swing into feelings of wild romantic love for somebody else, and then swing into feelings of the sex drive for somebody that you barely know. So it leaves the human animal with a great deal of I don't know what to say about it. You're possible of marrying some person and being adulterous, but we do make decisions. We've got a big cerebral cortex with which we make decisions. And of course, we are at a time now in human evolution where we have an opportunity to do a lot of different things. and it's a time when we need to make decisions about how we want to lead our lives. So anyway, I did begin to put people into this brain scanner. That's a New Yorker. You can't get two people in a brain scanner, but that was their idea of it. And this is the scanner that we have used most recently up at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And this is what we found. I had really thought that romantic love would be part of the cortex. I mean, you think about it, you write letters about it, you have myths and legends and poems, etc. about it, and certainly the emotions. And indeed, there is. But what we really found was activity in a tiny little factory near the base of the brain called the ventral tegmental area. It's a little brain region that actually makes dopamine, a natural brain stimulant, and sends that brain neurochemical to many brain regions that gives you the obsession, the craving, the focus, the motivation, and the elation of romantic love. And what's interesting to me about it, it's at the base of the brain, the midbrain. It lies right next to factories that orchestrate thirst and hunger. Thirst and hunger keep you alive today. Romantic love enables you to focus your mating energy on somebody and drive your DNA into tomorrow. So my brain scanning partner and I call it a survival mechanism, an ancient survival mechanism that evolved to focus your mating energy on a particular individual and start the mating process. And I'll say it again, it ain't gonna change whether you swipe left or right on Tinder. It will be with us if we're around 1,000,000 years from now. Close to it is the brain region linked with feelings of attachment. Romantic love can be triggered instantly. It's like the fear system. You can be scared instantly, and you can wire that in that, suddenly the right person, the right time, they fit within what I call your love map, an unconscious list of what you're looking for a partner, the time is right for you, and you can trigger that brain circuitry for romantic love and be off to the races. Attachment takes some time to grow. That's what we found among our people. And the third of those three brain systems is the sex drive. They are all way below the cortex where you do your thinking, way below limbic regions in the middle of the head that orchestrate the emotions, in basic brain regions linked with drive. Romantic love and attachment are human drives. Technology can't change them, but but it can change, and certainly is changing, the way we court. In my day, a guy called me on the phone. He picked me up after dinner, and we went parking sometimes. But anyway, I guess that term is sort of out of use these days, but at least you know what it means. Or meeting friends, whatever. These days, you get in touch by, emailing, texting, emojis, sexting. We were always sexting, but we are little brownie cameras, and it just went to one person. Now it can go to about 70 million. And in fact, I studied that with Match.com. It's quite remarkable that 70% of singles who send these sexy pictures are terrified that their friends will see it, that their parents will see it, that their people they work with will see it, but they do it anyway. And they do it because this is such an intense human drive. There's all kinds of new rules and taboos that I follow with Match. Don't have time to say them now. Could do it in the question and answer period. And these dating sites are really doing some new things. I mean, certainly expanding our dating pool, no question about that. Really introducing like-minded people. Certainly older people. Actually, one of the fastest growing dating sites right now is Our Time. It's for people over 50. And we're seeing more interracial partnerships because of that. So times are changing. And in fact, I'm just going to do a little thing here. Dating services are not dating services. Everybody in that business knows that these are not dating services. What they are is introducing services. That's all they are, is introducing services. We can give you somebody from the right background, the right ethnic mix, the right interests, the right education, and hopefully somebody who lives next door. But the only real algorithm is your own brain. These are introducing sites. You've got to get out and meet the person yourself. And then when you do, people say, oh, this is so unnatural. It's absurd. And, you know, when you go out and you are talking with somebody, you smile the way you always did. You laugh the way you always did. You parade the way you always did. You assess the person the way you always did. The only real algorithm is your own brain. So I've never given actually this speech before. I do something really quite different, but I just wanted, because it is about romance in the digital age, to give you a couple tips on how to use these sites. There's nothing wrong with this technology. I can't tell you how many people are just so grumpy with me about the technology. Nothing wrong with the technology, but it's so new that we don't know how to use it. And here's the problem. The real problem is that the brain is not built to assess 100 people or 1,000 people. It's not built that way. It's built, it was built probably millions of years ago to assess between 5 and 9 choices. And then after that, scientists have, you probably heard this term, cognitive overload. After about 9 choices, you don't choose anybody. You're going to like this. It just turns into an addiction. You're just going like this. And so one of the first things that I say to people who are going to use these sites of all ages, is stop. After you've met 9, not just talk to 9 people, met 9 people, stop. Get off the site and get to know at least one of those persons more. The more you get to know somebody, the more you like them, and the more you think that they are like you. And that's, I was reading this thing the other day in the New York Times about a woman who said she'd been on 86 dates and couldn't find anybody. Well, it's because she was on met 86 people that she couldn't, had she stopped on. And if you don't, you know, meet the right person in the first 9, go back on the site a few months later, or a whole pile of sites, whatever. But the bottom line is you've got to learn how to use it, and to use it, you need to know that the brain cannot really cope with more than about 9 choices. The second thing that I say to people is think of reasons to say yes. There's a huge brain region linked with what we call negativity bias. We remember the negative. Let's say you go to a party and everybody's really sweet, and oh, this and that, next thing. And then one person says, oh, have you gained a little weight? What do you remember? Just that. The brain, for Darwinian evolutionary reasons, it was very adaptive millions of years ago to remember the negative. And so when you're meeting somebody for the first time, you know very little about them, and you can overweight those few things about them. So try to overlook, unless they're 50 years older and 2 feet tall, and it's quite clear. But the bottom line is try to think of reasons to say yes. So let's say you find the person. Is monogamy natural? Adultery is also natural. This is, you know, they seem to go together often. But mono means one, and gamy means spouse. One spouse. That's what it means. Polygyny is many, poly, gyne, women. So the bottom line is monogamy does not mean fidelity to academics. It just means one spouse. And if you were to go around the world just counting heads, you would find that the vast majority of people in every single culture on Earth forms a pair bond. This makes us very unusual. 97% of mammals do not pair up to rear their young. People do. And so I've spent almost my whole life, certainly my academic life, trying to figure the evolution of pair bonding. But I won't go into that now. I'll just simply say that, you know, 86% of world cultures do permit a man to have several wives, harem building. But what anthropologists don't tell you is that only about 5 to 10% of men in those cultures actually have several wives. You got to have a lot of goats, a lot of chicken, a lot of fruit trees, a lot of money, a good, to have a woman share you. And I really learned my thing. I was in the highlands of New Guinea, and this guy is wearing his version of the tuxedo. He's not. Generally, they're wearing shorts and a thing. Anyway, I was riding around in the most beat-up van. I mean, you could put your foot right through the floor and see that it wasn't paved land or anything. But anyway, the bottom line is sitting on an old rusted tin can, and there were 3 men in the back with me. And one of them had 3 wives. So I said to him, I said, how many wives would you like to have? There was this long pause, and I thought to myself, is he going to say 5? Is he going to say 10? Is he going to say 25? And he leaned towards me and he said, none. It's a toothache. A whole lot of wives is a toothache. People get jealous. And we are built basically to have one partner at a time, pair bonding. So where are we headed? This is what I was asked to speak about. I told you that I was extremely optimistic about the future. And the reason I'm optimistic is for several reasons, but largely because I am this chief scientific advisor for MATCH. I've been it for 14 years. And for the last 10 years, we've collected data on American singles. All ages, all backgrounds, all colors, etc. We do not poll the MATCH members. We poll the American public. It's a representative sample of Americans based on the US Census. So every year I ask about 200 questions. Some questions are trend questions and some are new questions. But almost every year I ask, have you ever had a friends with benefits relationship? Over 50% say yes. Not necessarily last year, but over the course of their time. Over 50% of American singles of all ages have had a friends with benefits relationship. And over 50% have lived with somebody long-term before they wed. And most Americans regard this as reckless, just reckless. And I thought to myself, from a Darwinian perspective, there's an awful lot of people doing all this. There's got to be some payoffs here, some Darwinian payoffs. And then I ran into an article. The article said that 67% of cohabiting couples are terrified of the consequences of divorce, terrified of them. And it began to occur to me that this is not reckless behavior, this is caution, particularly among the young. And what they're doing is they want to know every single thing about somebody before they tie the knot. So they're going to do it slowly and in some sort of organized fashion. And the main way that they're doing it, what we're seeing today is it's a real extension of the pre-commitment stage, where marriage used to be the beginning of a partnership. Now it's the finale. This long period of pre-commitment. And very often, 70% of singles today, it starts with just friends. They're just friends. They got an eye on each other, but they're just friends. Then they move into friends with benefits. You learn a lot between the sheets. Not just how they make love, but, do they have a sense of humor? Can they be kind? Can they listen? Can they be patient? You learn a lot about somebody. And then they slowly move out into the official first date. It's fascinating how many people in the press say, oh, nobody's having a date anymore. They are having a date. But instead of the beginning of the relationship, when it's like a look-see, they're waiting. They don't want to spend $200 on dinner unless they like somebody. So the official first date has become actually more meaningful than in the past. Then they slowly get friends and family and everybody learning about it and live together for a long period of time before they wed. And it began to occur to me with this long pre-commitment stage and getting to know somebody in many, many ways before they wed, that perhaps what we're going to see is more solid marriages. They used to get married, women used to get married at age 20, now it's 27, almost 28. Men used to get married at 23, now it's 29, almost 30. So they get this long period of time of learning about themselves, of getting rid of what doesn't work for them. And my hypothesis was, well, okay, then they know by the time they walk down the aisle, they know who they got, they know they want who they got, and they think they can keep who they've got. And in fact, the young are very positive about this. When I ask, 89% of them feel that, that when they marry, they are going to marry for life. So I did a study of 1,100 married people to see whether I call it slow love. And I wanted to see, well, are we going to have more happy marriages because people are waiting so much longer? So I did a study of almost 1,100 people who were long-term married, 20 years on average. And I asked them a lot of questions, but one of the questions was, would you remarry the person that you're currently married to? So just to ask you, what do you think I found? What percentage of people? Scream it out. 50? 25? 17? 81%. Yeah. And 75% isn't. Nobody believes it, but yeah, there's happy people on the planet. And they're all around you probably, actually. So what makes a happy partnership? Now, psychologists will say a lot of good things. They'll say, well, listen actively, don't show disrespect, don't threaten divorce, all good. But this is what the brain says. This is our data on long-term, happily married people. When we put them in the machine, this is what we found. We found activity in 3 brain regions. So this is some of the people. We did it in China, and we did it in New York. And here's what we found. We found, these are people who are in a long-term, 20 years marriage, and they're not just loving their partner, they say they are in love with their partner. We found activity in those same brain regions that we found activity among those who've just fallen in love. But we also found activity in these long-term happy couples, activity in 3 brain regions. Brain region linked with empathy, brain region linked with controlling your own stress and your own emotions, and third, and most important, activity in a brain region it's actually suspension of the negative. So we call it positive illusions. They have the ability to overlook what they don't like about somebody and focus on what they do. So these are the 3 things that are going on in a long-term happy partnership. But you got to pick the right person. So when Match came to me first in 2005, they asked me, why do you fall in love with one person rather than another? And I said, I don't know. Nobody really knows. We do know that timing is important, proximity is important. At my age, I would say that lighting can help. We tend to fall in love with somebody from the same ethnic and socioeconomic background, somebody with a similar level of intelligence, good looks, education, same religious and social values, same reproductive goals and economic goals. Your childhood always plays a role. I talk about the genetics, but your childhood always plays a role. But I began to think, you can walk into a room and everybody is from your background and same level of education and intelligence and good looks with the same basic values, and you don't fall in love with all of them. So maybe biology plays a role. Maybe, could it be really, that we are chemically, literally chemically, drawn to one person rather than another? So I began to look through all of the academic literature of the last, 40 or so years, looking for any trait at all linked with any brain system. Now, there's all kinds of things that do come out of our biology. One of them is intimacy. Women tend to get intimacy from face-to-face talking. We do what's called the anchoring gaze, and we talk. And that's intimacy to most women. It probably comes from millions of years of holding that baby in front of your face, cajoling it, reprimanding it, educating it with words. Men tend to get intimacy from side-by-side doing. As soon as he looks up, he'll look away. My boyfriend can sit and watch football and say nothing to the other men in the room, and they had a perfectly intimate Sunday afternoon. Probably comes from millions of years of sitting behind that rock bush or whatever on the grasslands of Africa, trying to hit that buffalo in the head with a rock. You can't be yakking with your neighbor to do your job. Here's the problem. People are different. So I wanted to find out how they're different. So I looked at all the academic literature. Actually, I took a slide out. I probably should have shown you. But anyway, I found there's a lot of systems in the brain, but most of them keep the eyes blinking or the heart beating. They're not linked with any personality trait. These 4 brain systems, dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen, are 4 brain systems that are each one linked with a constellation, a suite of personality traits. So I decided what I would do is create a questionnaire to see to what degree you express the traits in all 4 of these brain systems. I put that questionnaire on Match.com, and as was said, it's now been taken by 14 million people in 40 countries. I call people who are very expressive of the traits in the dopamine system explorers, those very expressive of the traits in the serotonin system builders, directors, and negotiators, and these are the academic terms. I'm going to actually give you that questionnaire at the end of this. It's a gift to you. I haven't even mentioned it. It's a gift to you. It generally costs $300. You have to take it if you want to take it in the next 24 hours because we can't have it floating around forever. But anyway, I'll show you that link a little farther in this talk. But anyway, I want to go through these 4. Oh, thank you. So I want to go through these 4 and show you some of the basics of what I've learned. This is one person. Don't forget, unlike most questionnaires where you're lumped in this or lumped in that, that's not the way the brain works. We're all a combination of all kinds of things. I'm an identical twin, as it was mentioned, and even she and I are not exactly alike. I've never met 2 people who I thought were exactly alike. We all are variations, ratios of these 4 basic brain systems, and a lot more, others too. But anyway, so I'm going to go through these 4. If these are the traits, physiological traits, linked with the dopamine system in the brain, these people I called explorers. The novelty-seeking, risk-taking, sensation-seeking is what they call it. They're curious. They've got the most interests. They make the most money. They also lose the most money because they're so risk-taking. They're energetic. They're exploratory. And they're not just jumping off of bridges. I mean, they're going to the opera, they're going to the theater, they're coming to an evening like this. They're readers, etc. They're explorers. Optimism and enthusiasm are in the dopamine system. Independent, self-reliant, impulsive, spontaneously generous. They can walk into a bar and buy everybody a drink. Mentally flexible, open-minded, largely Democrats, actually, but I don't really say that to most audiences, but I imagine you guys are not too much for Trump. But the big thing is idea generation. These people generate ideas. It's called verbal and numeric creativity. On the downside, they can be susceptible to boredom. I'm one of them. I don't get on a plane without at least a month of work, just in case we're on that tarmac for 1 month. They can be reckless, unreflective. They tend to look out, not in. They can be manic, insincere, opportunistic, and unpredictable. Not all of them. We're all a combination of this. A good example is Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, early endorser of Bitcoins, a real entrepreneur, and very interested in radical ideas. Another example is Gloria Steinem, iconoclastic, independent, and creative. Very different people, very different backgrounds, very different contributions, but the same basic chemistry, brain chemistry. And when I looked in 30,000 people, I can watch who's drawn to whom. I found that these people are drawn to people like themselves. Explorers, high dopamine people are drawn, they're risk takers, they're novelty seekers, they're creative, curious, spontaneous, energetic, and they tend to be drawn to people like themselves. People who are very expressive of the serotonin system, I call them pillars of society. They tend to be, observe social norms. They're traditional, they're conventional, they want the familiar. They're cautious. They're not scared, but they're cautious. They're calm, self-controlled. They're modest. Modesty seems to be in the serotonin system. I always say to people who are dating, I said, you know, brag a little. Courtship is really not about honesty. Courtship is about winning. You got to win. I don't recommend it, but bottom line is they tend to be very modest. They like plans, schedules, routines. They're concrete thinkers, and they're literal thinkers, and detail-oriented. And boy, did I learn my lesson. I'd written a book on this called Why Him, Why Her, and I happened to be in Seattle. And I was being interviewed by somebody from the major newspaper, and I could tell that this woman couldn't stand me. And the more nervous I got, the more flamboyant I got, and she hated me even more. And I got the paper the following morning on the way to the airport, and sure enough, I was right. And it suddenly occurred to me in that taxi cab, Helen, I don't believe anymore in the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. I believe now in the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have done to themselves, and that you will reach them and win. What I should have done with this woman, she's detail-oriented, a literal, concrete thinker. Instead of my big theories, I should have showered her with the ventral tegmental area and the eigenanalysis and, just all the detail, and it would have been a different. So it was a great learning moment for me. They're good with numbers. They have more close friends. They need to belong. They follow the rules. They're religious. And loyalty. Every time I do the math, the same thing happens. There's one question, you'll see a version of it. And the question is something like, I can't remember exactly how it's said, but it's something like, would you rather have loyal friends or interesting friends? Now, we all want loyal friends, and we all want interesting friends, but it's a forced choice. You got to choose. And this particular type has to have, they've got to have loyal friends, and the other three types have to have interesting friends. It's a real divide. On the downside, they can be closed-minded, controlling, rigid, stubborn, and moralistic. I always hate that slide. You got it. So he didn't say he was a creative conservative. He's a principled conservative. He didn't say he had, imaginative, It's common sense. Evangelical Christian, it's very nationalistic, etc. So he's a very good example of it. Another example is Queen Elizabeth. She had a real hard time with Diana. She said, this is a rolling stone, I can't cope. And they are also drawn to people like themselves, traditional, conventional, follow rules, respect authority, want somebody like themselves. In these two cases, at least chemically, similarity attracts. In the other two cases, opposites attract. High testosterone, the director, they tend to be analytical, logical, good spatial skills, good at math, computers, engineering, experimental, exacting, definitely. Rank-oriented. You inject testosterone into a dove or a lizard or a monkey, and they'll begin to fight for rank. And the high testosterone people are very sensitive to rank. And they do something called dominance matching. They attack. And if you don't attack back, they think you're weak. And it happened to me one night. It was a black tie event in New York, and I was standing there with 4 men. And a guy from the Wall Street Journal was taking me to the cleaners. And I got smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's 2 basic postural messages in the animal community, looking little and looking big. It's called crouch and loom. And I was crouching, and he was becoming more and more dreadful. And I finally turned around to this man, and I said something that was vicious. I don't remember what it was, but it was also funny. And all 4 of them went like this. It's called the barred tooth display. Chimpanzees do it. They do it. People do it when they're nervous. And I thought to myself, oh, if he thinks like a woman, he'll never forgive me. If he thinks like a man, it might be dominance matching, and he might like me. All of a sudden, he says, oh, Helen. He started to laugh. That allowed the other 3 to laugh. And that man has respected me to this day. But it's hard to do if you're not that style. Emotionally contained. I had a girlfriend who had a very high testosterone husband, and she said to him, she said, you know, baby, you haven't said you loved me in a month. And he said to her, well, I said that last month and nothing's changed. So they're emotionally contained, decisive, bold, and direct. They focus. On the downside, they can be uncompromising, impatient, demanding. Mind blindness is an academic term for the fact that they don't read posture and gesture and tone of voice very well. I think that may have been why the evolution of tears, women cry tears more than men. Then he gets it, he can see this. They're less empathetic. It's interesting, as testosterone goes down in men, they get more and more empathetic. And you know, in the world today, we want people to be very empathetic. But when you think about it, all through human evolution, men's jobs did not require empathy. You know, you can't be weeping as you slit the throat of a baby gazelle and bring it home for dinner. And indeed, young men tend to be less empathetic, and it is linked with the testosterone system. But they're fair. Fairness is in the testosterone system, which I think is very interesting. And they can be aloof. They don't suffer fools gladly. A good example is Steve Jobs, and you can actually see it in his face. The very square jaw, the high brow ridges, the heavy brow ridges, the high zygomatic arch, the whatever, I can't remember the common name. It's all built by testosterone. This is why, you know, you see some of your really masculine people in Hollywood, and we regard it as very attractive. And what they're really signaling is high testosterone. And of course, he was a guy who, you know, very disciplined, brash, prickly, brutally honest. They're very honest, exacting, demanding. I think another example is Hillary Clinton. You know, when she was asked why she was attracted to Bill, she said, he wasn't afraid of me. Now, I wouldn't have thought of that. And they are attracted to their opposite, the high estrogen type. High estrogen, I call them negotiators. One of the main things they do is I coined that term, web thinking. It was before the internet that I coined it, but whatever. They're big picture seers. They're contextual, holistic. They think long term. We know why. The amount of cables, axons going to the 2 hemispheres of the brain. Women, people higher estrogen, which is mostly women, but some men, have more connections to different parts of the brain. So they're collecting data from more regions. The male brain, built by testosterone, is more compartmentalized. Neither is bad, they're just different. So they're big picture thinkers. Imaginative, mentally flexible. They can tolerate ambiguity, probably because they got this going and this going and this going, and they can see all of these variations and don't seem to be bothered by it. They are people skills, linguistic skills. They've got good at reading posture, gesture, tone of voice, reading faces. They're intuitive. We actually know now the biology of intuition. In fact, a guy, Herb Simon, just long time ago, won a Nobel Prize for this. It's not magic, and I could go into why it is, but this high estrogen type tends to be more intuitive, and they're more empathetic, nurturing, trusting, and pro-social. And this thing, trusting, is the most important thing for me. Anthropologists have not been able to figure out why would trusting have evolved. And indeed, I once, a couple years ago, read this article that they said that if you trust the right person, you save a lot of metabolic time and energy. And it began to occur to me, this is why a whole series of things can evolve together. People who are trusting, if they're high estrogen, they also can see long-term and holistically, adding up a lot. They can be imaginative about how the person is thinking. They're intuitive. They can get into that person's brain, and they can read postures, gestures, and tone of voice. So you can begin to see how a host of personality traits can evolve together. They're also introspective. They not only look out, but in. Everything has meaning. Just the way he sliced the lemon for the drinks at night means you're not having sex tonight. Everything has meaning. And one has to remember that one. They seek harmony. They're agreeable, emotionally expressive, and what I call diplomatic intelligence. On the downside, they can be scattered. They don't think they're scattered, but other people will. Indecisive. It depends. We could do it this way. We could do it that way. It depends. We could do it this way. Make up your mind. I am making up my mind. We can do it this way or that way. They're placating. They want to level that playing field. Ruminating. They'll think over and over and over. They'll remember what you didn't do 5 years ago. They can be gullible if they're too trusting, hypersensitive, backstabbing, not going to hit you in the face, but they certainly can stab you in the back, and unforgiving. They remember. And one of the basic reasons probably is because there's a huge number of estrogen receptors in the hippocampus, the main brain region for memory, and effusive. Oprah, good example. The only time I ever made a bad decision is when I didn't follow my instinct. Clinton, whole world knows he can't stop talking. And as he wrote in his book that was, 963 pages or something, I think it's important to have a synthesizing mind. That's a very high estrogen thing. Good people skills, emotionally expressive, feels everybody's pain, very soft face instead of that high testosterone face. You know, Americans have, not only Americans, but others, have long wondered when we were going to have our first female president. I think we've had our first female president. And Charles Darwin, that man connected every living thing in his huge theoretical perspective. And in fact, I think he's very much of the dopamine and estrogen. And that's what I really would like you to remember, that we're a combination of all of them. And so high estrogen goes for the high testosterone. This is of no use to you, but it's very important to me. But just to convince you. What I did is I had 17 people take my questionnaire, and then I put them in the brain scanner in 2 studies. You got to play in the major journals. You got to do it twice, and it's got to come out the same way. I was able to prove that if you score high on my dopamine scale, you also show activity in brain regions linked with dopamine, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, when it was in the introduction, and thank you very much for that, it's the only questionnaire in the world that started from knowledge of brain circuitry to make a questionnaire, and then went on to do brain scanning studies to prove it. Every other questionnaire in the world starts from linguistic studies or psychology, and you can't start from linguistic studies to make a questionnaire and then go back to linguistic studies to prove it. And this is the reason that it is becoming better known. And I don't know how long I'll live, but I'm in good health, but I'm getting old. And but I do think that at some point it will be a dominant personality trait thing. So here is the URL. It's only for you. If you want your partner to take it, that's fine too. Maybe you could learn something. As I said, it costs a lot of money, so it is a gift. And you can take it anytime before midnight tomorrow night. And you will not get a 22-page printout explaining who you are. That's something that really would cost an awful lot more money. It's just going to give you the basics of where you stand in these 4 brain systems, and then it's going to describe the traits of these systems. So you're going to have to make that leap of what this means to you. But anyway, here it is. So I'm going to tell you a little story about this. I was with Match. I was in Japan, and they were introducing Match to the Japanese audience. So we had a week of talking to journalists and this and that, and then came the last night. And I said to my wonderful little handler, I said, well, what are we doing tonight? She said, well, Helen, we're going to have a little party. And you are going to, so I get to this place, and it looks like the White House, and huge mannequins with wedding dresses and enormous 6-foot-high flower arrangements. And I was told that first I was going to explain these 4 personality styles, and then I was supposed to, and then they were going to wheel out 4 bottom layers of a wedding cake. Everybody had taken my personality questionnaire, so, and they were all wearing a little wristband. Energetic yellow for dopamine, conventional royal blue for serotonin, what I call power tie red for testosterone, and what I call tree hugger green for estrogen. So they all had their primary little rubber band on them. And apparently what they were going to do is they're going to wheel out the bottom of 4 wedding cakes, about 2 feet by 2 foot bottom of wedding cake. And these 4 basic styles of thinking and behaving, we're going to go to 4 parts of this huge ballroom and decorate the wedding cake. Oh man, the nadir of my academic career. I don't know much about wedding cakes. But anyway, this is what I saw. High estrogen people, that was their design. That thing was smiling at me. Let's connect, let's be together, let's, I'm safe for friendship. So I said, well, that's a good beginning. Then I went to the high testosterone cake. There's no emotion in that cake. But they thought outside the box. They decorated around the cake. It was very imaginative, very creative, etc. Then I went to the builder, the serotonin cake. It's lush. It's more formal. We got 1 kiwi, 1 cherry, 1 kiwi, 1 cherry, 1 kiwi, 1 cherry. It's an organized wedding cake. It's probably who you want to do your wedding cake. I followed the rules. Then last, I came to the dopamine, the high dopamine, risk-taking, novelty-seeking, explorer type. The crowd passes. I've got about 500 people in the room. First thing I see is 3 boys pitching fruit at the cake. Then they see me coming. And one guy, excuse me, takes some flowers out of a vase that has nothing to do with the decoration and plunges it into the middle of the cake. And that's what we see here. So the bottom line is people are different. They have personalities. These personalities do tend to come in patterns. There's all kinds of patterns in nature. And I really have come to believe, not in the golden rule, I don't believe anymore doing others as you would have done to yourself. As I said, I believe in this platinum rule to treat others as they want to be treated, and you can win. So I really want to end here with a couple things. Foremost, we evolved for millions of years in our little hunting and gathering groups. And in those groups, women commuted to work to gather their fruits and vegetables. They came home with 60 to 80% of the evening meal. The double income family was the rule. And from what we know from modern hunting and gatherers, men and women were equals. Women expressed their sexuality, and they were just as economically, sexually, and socially powerful as men. We then began to settle down on the farm maybe 10,000 years ago. Women lost their ancient role as gatherers. They couldn't leave the farm. Men's roles became much more important, moving the trees, moving the rocks, plowing the land, taking the produce off to local markets, and coming home with the equivalent of money. And we see in agrarian societies around the world the rise of new beliefs about what a man is and what a woman is. The belief of virginity in marriage, arranged marriages, honor thy husband, a woman's place is in the home, a man is the sole provider, until death do us part. These are all agrarian beliefs. They are leaving us before our very eyes. In fact, what we're really doing today, right now, is shedding 10,000 years of our farming life and returning, moving forward to our roots. And I think millennials are leading the way with their long period of pre-commitment, picking people for companionship and not for money, and being very careful, and also moving into the workforce. Women are reacquiring their ancient status. We are moving forward to the kinds of partnerships that we are highly built for. So we're seeing more egalitarian marriages, and I think because of this long pre-commitment stage and what I call slow love, more happy marriages. So I'll really end with this. Love will be with us forever. It's a basic brain system. It is primordial, adaptable, and eternal. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, you had a few things to say. I want to go right back to your list of all the things that are markers to determine whether or not you're in love, and ask you, as you've referred to the fact that you've recently fallen in love, did you refer to the list to determine whether or not you were in love, or did it come from somewhere else?
You know, people always ask me about that, and you know, you can know every ingredient in a piece of chocolate cake, but then when you sit down and eat that cake, you just feel that same old joy of everybody else. So that's the way I felt. On the other hand, I mean, you know, he's a journalist. He wrote for 22 years for the New York Times, and so we have, and he's written books, so we have the same lifestyle. I thought he was very handsome. He's very funny. So he fit within my love map. But it took some time to get him, actually.
And were you looking? Or
I was looking.
Okay.
Yeah, I was looking. I wonder if I should tell this story. It's a pretty... I've never told this story before.
And just before you tell it, we do not have anything on Slido so far. So if we could have the questions up on the stage, that would be terrific. Thank you.
So, might regret this. So we were both invited to he was going through a horrible divorce. I mean, a really, really bad divorce. And he was a single father. He'd been a single father for several years. And so we were both invited to a big, a week-long in out west at a dude ranch kind of thing. For a week, we went hiking in with everybody else. There were 20 people there. Anyway, we were driven back to Bozeman, just the two of us in the car. He's driving along and he's saying, "I'm never having another relationship. Never. Absolutely never." And I thought to myself, geez, I'm the only one in the car, you know. So we went out as just friends for about a year. And he'd always just give me a nice hug, and that'd be that. And finally, after a year of this, we went out, we were gonna have dinner, then walk the High Line in New York and go play pool. So I don't know what got into me, but I pulled the little napkin out from underneath my drink, and I said, why don't we write down secretly on each napkin what we would like to win if we win at pool? So I wrote down a real kiss. I didn't know what he wrote down. We played pool. He creams me at pool. He grew up with a pool table. I'd paid like 4 times in my life. I open his napkin, and it says, sex and clarity. So I said, I know the sex part, but what do you have in mind for clarity? So we start walking. We did not make love that night. And I said to him, I said, you have to realize, though, I mean, that if you start having sex with somebody, you could fall in love. Are you willing to take that chance?
You asked him that right there and then?
Right there and then. And he said yes. Huh. So now we're almost living together and everything's fine. Wow. Yeah.
Did you have to negotiate how much of your relationship could be just from your heart and how much of it was from your mind as you're calculating what's actually happening between the two of you as you're escalating this relationship?
No, we really didn't, but it was interesting that when his son went off to college, he came back that same night because while the son was at home, we didn't ever spend the night together. But we would go to the opera and we would do all kinds of things. It wasn't really friends with benefits. It was just 2 people who did, anyway. And he came to me and he said, now we can be together, he said. But I want 2 to 3 nights to myself every week. So I put my hand behind my back and said, well, how many do you really want? You want 4? You want 7? I mean, what's going on here? And he said, no, I just want 2 or 3. A blessing for me. I love that time by myself. And so it's a new term, I'm more and more introducing it, called LAT, living apart together. And it's not for everybody, but I do think that we now live in an age where you can build the kind of partnership you want. It's no longer a cookie cutter. And we've got polyamory, we've got trans, we've got gay, we've got all kinds of people doing all kinds of things. And it's working very well for me.
What's it like to study at a time when there is so much more openness? Because it hasn't been that long that people have been able to love who they want to love in a more open and a more, not everywhere, but increasingly so. So as a scientist, as you're looking at love and relationships, what's it like to see those strange kind of paradigms shifting?
It's absolutely thrilling. I mean, even, that's when, I really opened this thing that we're in the middle of a marriage revolution, and some demographers would say as powerful as the Industrial Revolution. And when you think about it, the difference between a woman having to marry at age 20, and she really, 100 years ago, she had to marry a person who was the same religious background, the same social background, with a lot of enough money, and hopefully in the farm next door. She really couldn't marry for a companion. And now we can. And it's the young, it's the single, the young millennials who are really taking this and doing it. They're taking their time, they're getting to know themselves, getting to know others, they're getting rid of what they don't want, and I really admire them for that. But they are the point man for this whole marriage revolution, I think.
We have a number of questions that our audience have made selections on, and so I want to ask you some of those. But I do want to, when you were a young scientist, was there a moment when you said, I want to dedicate my inquiry to love and relationships, or was this an evolutionary thing for you?
It seemed to be more of an evolutionary thing. We were talking at dinner, I'm an identical twin, and when I was in graduate school, they were absolutely, the professors were all thought that the brain was just a motor, and that personality was inscribed by your environment. I knew it wasn't true. As an identical twin, I knew it wasn't true, that there had to be some biology to behavior. And so I thought to myself, when I was writing my PhD dissertation, if there's any part of human psyche that was built behaviorally through evolution, it would be love and sex and romance and attachment. Because if you have 4 children and I have no children, you live on and I die out. There's direct selection for people who mate and breed and raise their babies. And so I would have thought that there would have been absolute selection for those particular traits: romantic love, attachment, and parenting.
Okay. First question from Slido. Can you tell us a little bit about the new rules and taboos of dating? It's the one that you've observed.
Sure. Gosh, there's an awful lot of them. I'll just talk about the cell phone. When you go on a date, if you can, leave the cell phone in the car or leave it at home. And if you're going to take it with you, keep it in your pocket and turn it off. If you're going to use it, do not. 70% of singles are really turned off on a date if somebody uses their cell phone. Don't leave it on the table. If you do, turn it over. Don't take it with you to the bathroom. Don't take it outside if you're going to have a smoke. Stay away from your phone and just focus on the person. An official date is very different from just friends. With just friends, they can pick you up at home. You can go eat fast food. You can invite them even hours before. You can have as many drinks as you want. But when it's an official, real date, singles still want you to invite them 3 days at least in advance. They want you to meet them at the place. They don't want you to have more than 2 drinks. They want you to be nice to the wait staff, et cetera. They're actually very traditional.
So your best behavior.
Yes, and they want you on time. You can't be more than 15 minutes late. Yeah.
And is there specific language about it? Like, how do I know if we're going out as just friends or if we're going out as a date?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I think that most people probably know, but it's going to be different for different people. In New York anyway, a first date can cost you $100, $200. And so if you're just friends, you've probably been hanging around, you're saying, oh, what are you doing now? Oh, I'm not doing anything. Well, you want to do something? Sure. Well, we could go eat hot dogs in the park, and et cetera. So I think that's, but once, there's all kinds of rules for friends with benefits also.
Do you negotiate that in advance, or is that something you?
It's a good question, because when I've got this data on this 45,000 Americans, and I didn't ask it quite like that. I just asked, what are the rules? And among the rules, no sex with a friend. You don't tell anybody. It's a secret. You only meet under some circumstances. You can't call on other circumstances. It's a very, they know, what they're doing.
And are the rules the same for heteronormative people as opposed to LGBTQ++?
Yes. It's so interesting about gays and lesbians and all. What's interesting about it is that they're just like straights. I have tried to tell the press this for 10 years, but they always want to make them different. But they're very similar. Gays and lesbians fall in love just as often. They stay home and eat cereal just as often. They are really the same kind of exercise routines, and they're looking for the same thing in a partner. In fact, the 5 main, I ask every year, what do you really want in a partner? And I give about 20 different things, and you can check the boxes. And the top 5 things every single year, somebody who respects me, somebody who respects me, somebody who I can trust and confide in, somebody who makes me laugh, somebody who spends enough time for me, and last of the 5 is somebody who I find sexually attractive. They are looking today for a companion. When I ask, would you marry for financial reasons, only 14% women would say yes. 86% of singles are looking for companionship. And it's so interesting, even with Tinder, people always think that Tinder is just a hookup site, but I know the former sociologist, she did a whole study of Tinder, and in fact, something like over 80% are looking for some kind of relationship. Even that is not just a hookup site. But what's interesting about hookups is that men regard a hookup as a step towards a partnership more than women do.
This is a really interesting question coming right off of that. How do you think millennial dating trends are going to play out against the backdrop of increasing loneliness, anxiety, depression? There's so much discussion now about even things like cell phones and our interactions with devices
Yeah.
driving us apart as opposed to pulling us together. So how do you think these trends are going to play out against that?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think that the cell phones are driving us apart. I think, over 15, the average American does over 15,000 emails, and I don't know, in terms of texting, young singles want you to text back within 10 minutes. And they have constant interactions with each other. And in hunting and gathering societies, probably about 25 people lived in a group. They were always talking with each other. And these young texting are always talking with each other. We older people think, they're not talking to us, but they're talking to their peers. And I've long thought that there are sort of 4 stages of morality. Babies are focused on themselves. They got to survive. Teenagers have to begin to make relationships with other teenagers, because for millions of years, the parenting job is pretty well over. And as they grow up, the really important relationships are with each other. And so, okay, at the dinner table, the kids aren't talking to the parents and everybody thinks this is a failure. But the kids are building relationships with their peers, learning who they are, how to act, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a misunderstanding that this is driving people apart. I think what is making that depression is FOMO, fear of missing out. I mean, one of the problems today, and it's a big problem, I think, is that, everybody knows what everybody's doing. So if you weren't included, you know it. And I think that is the problem. What's interesting now is that murder is going way down, but depression is going way up. And I think it's that depression is linked with the fact that we now have such large communities, and you know more of where you stand in these communities. You know what's going on without you. And I don't know how to solve that except to train them to, don't kill yourself, for God's sakes,
What about the idea of privacy?
Privacy. So interesting, privacy, because, for millions of years there was no privacy.
No, we all lived together.
Yeah, we all lived together. And so we make this big thing about privacy as if it's a sort of an inherent natural way of being, when it's really quite unnatural. So I think we at least have the opportunity to build in privacy. I mean, if you don't want the world to know anything, don't post your sexy picture on the internet, And so I think we just have to learn. This is all new technology. Yeah. And with that, it's wonderful technology in some ways, but you have to learn how to use it. Now, for example, with me, there's various things that I would say to somebody by email that I really wouldn't dare say to them in person. I can be more intimate. I can say something that I had thought that I really wouldn't dare say in person. So there's good as well as bad to all this. Catherine, you're talking to an optimist. You can see this.
And somebody who really clearly loves her work.
It's such interesting,
What's the passion? Like, what keeps the passion alive for you?
I think curiosity. I'm basically dopamine.
Okay. With a little estrogen thrown in there for good measure.
Estrogen and dopamine, that's me. I don't have any testosterone in me, except I regard myself as logical. Okay. That's about it.
Try this one then. How can romantic love explain open relationships?
It's so interesting. Polyamory.
This is from the audience, by the way, and 49 of you wanted an answer to this one.
Oh, yeah, it's very interesting. Polyamory, many loves. It's a whole new thing right now. And what's interesting, on Match, I asked, how do you feel about them? 68%, not on Match, on the Singles in America study, which is not, we don't pull Match. It's an annual national study. And 68% are perfectly comfortable with the idea, but only 6% had ever tried it. And what's interesting about it is that we are a jealous animal. It's very hard to do. And what's interesting about it is it's not terribly different from adultery in that you have one partnership and you're having love affairs on the side. What's different about it, and I admire them for this, is that it's transparent. You are now telling your partner, you're making a deal with the partner, or more than one partner actually, sometimes, and you're setting rules. They have an enormous number of rules. and they have to be followed. And if you read, I don't know if they still have that magazine, Loving More, but the bottom line is, it's very intellectual. I mean, I can understand, I talked about these 3 brain systems, lust, romantic love, and attachment. These people want it all. They're not finding it in just one person. They've got a deep attachment. They don't want to lose that relationship. They admire it, they like it, they're comfortable in it, but they want the romance on the side. They want the sex here and there, whatever, with other people, and they want to be honest about it. So I applaud their intellectual drive, but it's very difficult to do because we are a jealous animal. Even in societies where a man is permitted to have several wives. I didn't mention it before, but I was riding in the back of that really beat up van in New Guinea Highlands, and not only did that one guy say he doesn't want any wives, but another guy said, Helen, he said, you can never have 2 wives because every time you're not at home, that wife knows where you are. You have to have 3 or more or none.
It's like academics looking for cross appointments, so nobody ever knows where they are. So I admire people who are doing trying to do the polyamory because they're being honest. But the amount of work, the constant conversation about how they feel, and all of that is something that's quite trying. I haven't tried it. I couldn't possibly do it.
Couldn't keep track.
No, I don't have that sort of temperament to share. Not a sharer.
Okay. 45 people in this room want to know, is it true that someone can grow on you? How does one know whether they're giving up too quickly? Can one's feelings actually change after a few days?
That's a wonderful question. And what's interesting, when I ask singles about the first date, over 80%, or I can't remember quite, but something like that, don't even expect chemistry on the first date. That's very sophisticated. Or the second date. And they're hoping by the third date, et cetera, et cetera. But there are ways to trigger it. One way is to get into bed with the person and try and drive up the dopamine.
Test it out.
Yeah, test it. But in my life, there was a man that was, he was such a pest. I went out, over and over. But after about 4 years, I fell in love with him. And it lasted 18 years. So it's possible. This brain system
We could actually have a little fun with that, right? We could really go and figure out.
But the bottom line is it can happen anytime. Love at first sight is very easy to explain. This brain system can be triggered instantly. The right time, the right kind of person walks in, boom, the brain system. Or it can take months. And I've really had people who, they married somebody because it was the right person at the right time, and they wanted to do this, they wanted to have children. And then after the children left for college, they fell in love with the person. It's very interesting. So don't give up. If you like the person, don't give up.
You mentioned romantic love being universal. Do you think the importance of romantic relationships is overinflated to the detriment of other connections, such as friendships, extended family, and so on?
I think they're all extremely important. What's interesting about family now is natal family. We're beginning to see a new kind of family. I call it the urban clan. I have an older sister that lives in Europe. I had a brother who lived in Independence, Missouri. I got a twin sister who lives in France. Families all spread out. So I live in New York City, and I've got a group of people who would help me if I was in the hospital, et cetera. We're an animal that needs family, needs that special kind of connection. And when we're more and more dispersed, of course, and so we are building what I call the urban clan, a new kind of family, related not consanguinely, but affinally, just by being friends. So I don't think family's ever going to die. It's amazing how little studies there are of friendship. I haven't read a lot about friendship, but they're very important. Good relationships are important. I wish I had brought that stuff. They boost the immune system. There's a whole list of things that a good relationship physiologically does for you. I just forgot it, but apparently bad relationships are just as bad for you as smoking, alcoholism, obesity, and lack of exercise. They can kill, yeah. So, unfortunately, we're now at a time we can leave bad relationships, not partners, but even friends and family, in order to make good ones. And it is physiologically, emotionally, psychologically, probably even spiritually, very important. And one of the studies I found that said that people in very good partnerships can live 7 to 10 years longer. So it's important.
Was the online questionnaire tested outside of the heterosexual paradigm?
Same.
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 Okay.
Now, for example, yeah, same, yeah. I mean, you know, whether you're conventional doesn't make any difference whether you're gay or straight, trans, you're a conventional person.
Okay.
It doesn't sound conventional because of your sexual orientation, but you're conventional and you might be religious and you might be cautious and you might be detail-oriented, et cetera. So these 4 personality styles seem to be universal. They are different in different countries, which is very interesting. For example, in China and Japan, there's a gene in the serotonin system linked with social norm conformity. And that gene is most present in China and Japan. And different countries have different, you know, concentrations of chemical styles.
And do you think that's about traditional societies or societal expectations?
I think it's genetic. But then the society, proposes it. I mean, you know, China's a very communal, and it's probably communal, certainly in part because genetically people are more prone to be conventional, you know, follow the rules, respect authority. The most, you probably wouldn't guess, there's a gene in the dopamine system linked with risk-taking, novelty-seeking. Most people would guess that that is in America. It's actually up the Amazon River. And it's probably one of 2 reasons. Either the very exploratory people were the ones that walked over the Bering Straits and all the way down there. That's the kind of person that would do it. Or it's such a hostile environment that the only person that can live there is the high dopamine type who can take the constant novelty, et cetera. So I'm becoming more and more interested not only in cultures and their almost personality styles and the traditions that grow out of them, but also leaders and political parties and everything.
One last question from the audience, and then we're going to have to wrap it up because I know people want to meet you and have you sign their books. Why do people match on Tinder but never message each other or reply to messages? I wanted to save that for the last one. 33 of you wanted an answer to that. 34 now.
Try a different site. I don't know.
Have you ever tried it?
I've never tried it, no.
Okay. How come?
I have my man.
Yeah, before him.
Before, Match wanted me to go on to their site because, of course, it would be very good advertising for them. But I was always somebody that I was semi-interested in. I did go on 4 dates, and they were very nice men, but it just wasn't quite the right thing. But when we ask every year, where did you meet your last first date? 40% of singles met on the internet. 25% met through a friend. Only 6 to 8% met in a bar, in a church, or at work. So it is the dominant way now of meeting people. So don't give up. And I'll just say one more thing about it. We've found 2 things that we scientifically know about these dating sites. One, we are seeing more interracial marriages, which I mentioned. The second thing is the people who meet on the internet are less likely to divorce. And I couldn't figure out why would that be? What does that have to do with it? But as it turns out, people who've met on the internet, people who've met on a paid dating site, tend to be better educated, make more money, have a permanent job, and are truly looking for a companion. So, so we're pulling from the environment the kind of person who really wants a relationship. So, it seems to work. It's the newest way to do this, same old thing, which is find a sweetheart. What's the next frontier for you? What's the next big question you want to go after? Oh, man. I want to know more about these personality things. And I do a lot of talks now in business because I think that these people innovate differently. I think they lead differently. I think they build teams in important ways. I'd like to bring all of this to even a wider world of understanding of who you are, who you love, how to talk to anybody.
Right. Thank you so much. What an incredible evening. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So nice. Take it back. Okay. 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 So,
Thank you.
I'd just like to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And for those of you who are going to be joining us virtually, we will be sharing this widely for you. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to get their books signed. There are books for sale in the lobby, so we'll ask you that you have your book open to the correct page. And Dr. Fisher is not going to be able to spend time interacting with all of you, but she will sign copies and you'll be able to say hello. And please do check us out online and make sure that you can check out UBC Connects. Thank you very much. Visit Slido to offer your feedback. We thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you.